Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to bring you more science fiction fantasy reviews. And a while back I did a video talking about science fiction books that you probably haven't read, and that video did very well. This is simply just a wrap up of the books I've read recently, but it just so happens that a lot of these are really underhyped. Some of these are new releases, but I feel like they're ones that are flying under the radar. So if you're looking for books that everyone is not talking about on every video, then hopefully this video will have some new recommendations for you all, some new books to check out. And yeah, I have some good ones here, so let's get started. First, let's talk science fiction, and I've received and read copies of the Bayern Agenda, the Aleph Extraction, and the new book that just came out is The Nova Incident, all by Moren. And this is a sci-fi trilogy that is really hard to pronounce the names of, but it's very good. This is one I received from Angry Robot Books, and as I mentioned, this last book just came out. But essentially, this is a book that, or rather a series that is set in a near distant future where there is a galactic Cold War, and in the first book we follow a man who works as a Cold War spy, and so it's a bit of a sci-fi thriller, and I had a lot of fun with these books. I will say they're a little bit more light in tone. I do lean towards like a grittier type of spy thriller, but knowing that it was coming from Angry Robot Books, I wasn't surprised that it's a little bit more fun, and so keep that in mind. But it was very enjoyable. So it's the kind of book that I wasn't really worried for the main character. You kind of assume he's going to get out of all the things that he gets himself into, but it was fun. I really like the second book because it's a bit more of a heist story and kind of a little bit of a departure from where the first book left us, so I enjoyed that one. And this last book was fun as well. Without giving away too much, it starts off with a bang because literally there's a bomb that explodes. And so all of these books, I say, were really well paced. They were fun. Not the kind of books that are gonna like change your life or make you reconsider what you're doing with yourself, but overall just really enjoyable, well paced, and the kind of books you can just fly through on a hot summer day. So I personally would recommend them. I thought they were a lot of fun, and again, like I'm going to talk about with a lot of these books, very underhyped. Next we have The Empyrean by Katherine Franklin, and this is a book that I received for review from the author via Audible, so I got to check out the Audible version of it. And this is a book that is a space opera. It's set in a far-flung future. Right at the beginning of the story, we follow someone who has lost their son in what is called Empyrean fire, and so they are devastated by that loss. They end up getting picked up by a crew, and the story goes from there. This is the kind of space opera that I just really enjoy reading. I will admit that there are definitely a lot of tropes that this book uses. It's not something I've never seen before. It's not totally different, but it did what it was doing really well. In terms of a narrative, I found it was well paced. It was intriguing. I was interested to know what was going to happen from the beginning all the way to the end, and I thought the characters were likable, or at least characters that I cared about or cared what happened to them. There's a good mystery to the novel, and I would say that the world building, I liked it because it was complex, but my one complaint, because again I did the review via Audible, is the fact that I didn't get to physically read the book. And I do find that in a case like this, sometimes when a book is really complicated in terms of world building, it's easier for me to actually read it rather than having it read to me. And so I did find the world building a touch confusing, but that might be more of a format issue of how I consumed it rather than the work itself. So I would definitely like to reread this book in the future, and I would not be surprised if, even if I do it again on audio, that rereading it might kind of iron out a few of the parts that I wasn't entirely sure how they all fit together. But in terms of an underhyped space opera, if you are someone who has read all the big hitters and are looking for something new, especially if you are someone who really enjoys Audible and audiobook versions, this is definitely one to check out. I will say that the narrator did a really good job. My only small quibble is that there's really long breaks between the chapters, but the narrator definitely gave me vibes of, I believe, Jefferson Mays, the author or narrator who did the Expanse series. So if you like the voice of the Expanse audiobooks, this is one you want to check out. It's not the same narrator, but he has a similar cadence to his voice. So I do recommend the audiobook version if you go that way. Next, I want to talk about Face by Joma West, and this is a very literary piece of speculative fiction that plays with the idea that we all wear a face. So there, of course, is the physical face we wear, but also the face that we present to society. In terms of a premise, I thought I was going to absolutely love this book. It's compared to some of my favorite literary fiction authors. However, in execution, it just did not work for me, and I was really disappointed. Honestly, I just didn't connect with the story, the characters. I found the narrative to be hard to follow. I just found that the way it was written did not really capture my attention, and it was really a miss. So one that I really, again, thought I was going to love and, well, did not. Next up, we have A Half-Built Garden by Ruthanna and this is a book I received for review from Tor Books. And this is one that is set in a near future where we follow someone who has made first contact with these aliens. These aliens are reaching out and trying to implore humanity to leave our planet behind and join them. And this is a really interesting book because it blends together a couple different things. So at its core, it is a story of alien first contact. And one of my favorite, I actually realized that I haven't read as much alien first contact as I thought I had. I want to do a video on the topic, but I need to read more apparently. And so in terms of the aliens, their introduction, I was enamored when they first showed up. The way they're introduced, how alien they are, they're very otherly, they're very different biologically from us, also cultural. And so you get a lot of conversations between this woman and the aliens as they're trying to interpret how their societies work, and their conversations around gender and other social norms. And it's very interesting. I like the fact that they aren't, again, just, aliens that are kind of like humans, but not technically humans. Instead, they feel very different. They truly feel like aliens. So that part of the story I absolutely loved. I will say that in terms of themes, this book is very heavy-handed, how it talks about gender identity, which I know is really important to having that representation out there. But I will say that it kind of stalled the story at different points where the narrative pacing just went to a halt at several points where the characters just stood around and talked about gender identity. And I do wish that it had been more nuanced and more kind of woven naturally into the story. However, my real criticism of the book is that while, yes, this is an alien first contact story, it also kind of reads like a family drama. So at the beginning of the story, you find out that this woman has this plural family, they have a young child, and throughout the story, so many times they stop, again, the actual alien contact narrative and focus on their family and their dynamics, and particularly they spend a lot of time discussing nursing this baby. And even though I'm a mother, I do not want to read about that all day. I do not need that representation of my own life on the page. I am so done with that, and I just really felt like it took me out of the story. There is a point in the climax where literally things are finally happening. There are reveals and the plot is moving along, and then they need to stop and find a diaper. And I just didn't love that. This book, it might sound like this book is comical from the way I'm describing it, but it has a very serious tone. I just didn't really love those family elements. So again, if you're someone who loves a family drama that is set in the near future, this book is very accessible. It doesn't have a lot of complicated science behind it. Maybe this book is for you, but it just rubbed me the wrong way because every single time things got interesting, the character had to stop and nurse. And yes, nursing is a big deal, but I didn't want to read a book about nursing. And so I'm really disappointed with this one because it started out so strong. I really thought it might end up on my favorites list, and now I don't think it's going to do that. Next up, we have Autonomous by Annalee Newitz, and this is a book that is set in a near future. We follow basically a pharmaceutical pirate named Jack, and she is responsible for making drugs that she helps to give away to poor people that can't afford to pay the pricey drugs that are being sold by the fancy pharmaceutical companies. So she makes these poor drugs, but in order to supplement her work, she also makes other drugs that she does sell on a black market. And you find out right at the beginning of the story that perhaps one of the drugs she is selling is having some terrible consequences, and so she has to deal with that. And this was a lot of fun. It's kind of like a Robin Hood version of a drug pharmaceutical company case. And I was really happy to see that even though this book obviously makes some really targeted commentary on the expensive nature of drugs, that this book was not shaming people for using drugs in the first place. I was really worried because of, I think, especially around like mental health, there's a lot of stigma that still exists surrounding taking different, mood drugs. And so I was happy that this book was not anti-drugs. It was just simply pointing out that there are definitely some big pharmaceutical companies that make some really big dollars off of the back of people's medical needs. So I thought this book was really topical. And then on top of that, there's also another character that's introduced, and they are an autonomous robot or AI character, which you know I tend to really like in books. I felt like the two plots and two character perspectives didn't totally fit together, but I like this one. I thought it was very intellectual, a little bit smart, and this book also takes place in Canada, and so I was fangirling over several moments where they're mentioning towns and places that I have heard of and even traveled to, and so that was really cool there. And so I do recommend this one. I don't think it's the least underhyped book on this list, but I also don't see a lot of people checking it out now that it's not a new release, so if you haven't yet, I do think it's worth your time if you're a big sci-fi reader. And switching over to fantasy, I also want to talk about The Last Blade Priest by W.P. Wiles, and this is another book that I received from Angry Robot Books. This is an early review copy, but I believe the final artwork is reasonably similar, and this is an epic fantasy series or book that I was not actually sure what I was going to think about it. I'll be honest, I did not request it for review. It showed up in the mail, and I wasn't totally sure if it was for me. I gave it a try, I put it down, then I picked it up again, and well, I loved it and finished it, so that is why it's in this video. This is a story that's told over multiple points of view, but the main setup is that we follow a builder who is someone who people have been overthrown by this other nation called the League, and he ends up getting pulled in to work for the League. However, in doing so, he's also actually going to be a spy, and the story goes from there. This is a book that if you want something that is underhyped and honestly just unique and different and avoids feeling really tropey, even though it's not like it doesn't have classic fantasy elements in it. It does, but it feels very new and different. This is one I like. I will say that the world building is oh so rich. It was probably my favorite aspect of the story, and it's just a very robust story. There is so much happening. There are different people and nations and magic, and the character work was very well done. It's definitely one I want to reread. I believe it's the beginning of a series, and I just want more. So please, Angry Robots, please send me more if there's more coming out. But yeah, absolutely love this one. There's also an element with elves, and it's not really like a classic elf take. Instead, there's kind of like elves that need to be put in their place, and I like that because I kind of get tired of like how elves are always treated as like this greater being in a lot of fantasy stories, and so this one just has a little bit of a different twist on that. And again, it was just interesting. I guess what I like so much about the story is that again, it wasn't tropey. I had no idea where the story was going. I really didn't even know the plot when I first picked it up. I just started reading it, and then I could not stop. I just read it and read it and read it and just burned through it in just, I think, 2 days. And it's a decently long book. And again, I believe there's more in the series. So again, if you're looking for a fantasy book that is not Brandon Sanderson, that isn't The Wheel of Time, that just is something you haven't heard about again and again and again, this is what I consider to be one of the sleeper hits of the year. Definitely recommend it. Definitely want to reread it. And yeah, highly recommend. Then I want to talk about the Dawnhounds. And this is a really unique fantasy story that almost has elements of science fiction because it reads a little bit like biopunk. And so in the story, we follow a young woman who is queer, and so within her day job, she works as a police officer. However, she gets changed to the night shift when she goes and has a tryst with a young woman at a late night bar. And so when it's found out, she loses her shift and so has to work the nights. On working nights, she finds some dead bodies, things get worse, she ends up getting killed off. And of course, within the story, there is a resurrection magic, so she comes back to life and ends up on a crew with pirates. This book is just so unique. I love trying to even describe this book and give you a decent synopsis because it's so different than all the other books I'm normally talking about here, especially when it comes to fantasy. So yes, I love the biopunk elements to the story. I thought that the magic was really cool. I am on a huge pirate kick because I'm currently watching this show on Starz, Black Sails, which I love. Has anyone else watched that? But going back to this one, I was just in the mood for a piratey story. So there are sea shanties. It's just unique. It has those queer elements. It's fun, it's snarky, it has some good banter, the character work is great. I believe it's the start of a new series, but no other books have been announced yet, and I'm just dying for more, so I need more people to read this book so that the publisher continues on with the series and gives me more books. So definitely recommend this one. I feel like no one is talking about it online, and I really want to change that. I thought it was so much fun, and yeah, loved it a lot. Definitely want to reread it. So that's it for this video here. I'm really happy with the collection of books that I happen to read. I don't know how I managed to get so many underhyped books on this list, but there's a lot of good recommendations here. So I'd love to hear of the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out? And also please recommend me if you came across recently a new science fiction or fantasy book that you feel like doesn't get enough love online. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of science fiction, fantasy, as well as horror thrillers and true crime. And if you want to help me out more, you can give me a thumbs up, share this video around online, drop an emoji, even if it's just a spaceship or a stack of books. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.